Welcome to the IBM InterConnect 2017 podcast series. We're coming to you from sunny Las Vegas. I'm your host, Dez Blanchfield, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Steve Ardire. Now, I'm going to quickly introduce you, Steve. You're a regular tweeter. You've been online since 2008. I see from your profile. You've got a solid following of about 4,100 followers. And you describe yourself as a strategic advisor focusing 100% on AI startups. You live in Olympic Peninsula in outside Olympic Washington State here in the USA. And there's a quote that I grabbed from your profile that says that you in one line, you connect and illuminate the dots that matter for a business strategy, funding, go-to-market, customer and partner engagement. Welcome to the podcast. How are you enjoying the show?
Thank you, Dez, for that very tight, succinct introduction, and that pretty much depicts, what I do and operate. So, how am I enjoying the conference? I was at both InterConnect 2016 and World of Watson, and my takeaway from the high-level view is I was very impressed with the messages were the key messages in terms of keeping data simple, getting inspired, empowering teams. We'll focus on that one a little bit further, and then building hybrid cloud. We're seeing the manifestation. My overall takeaway is that I'm seeing real instances of IBM delivering, on the promise of cognitive computing, with nice, tighter synergy. Of course, it needs to get tighter further, but across the cloud story to IoT and so on. So that's impressive.
If you were going to introduce yourself in a speed dating form, how would you describe yourself in 60 seconds?
Okay, so you got the thumbnail, and I'll just hit the point lines on that. I've been an advisor for 20 plus years, and the focus was across different startups. But 4 years ago, I made the concerted effort. I saw this tsunami coming. And I said, I'm going to get, well, maybe not a tsunami, a big wave, because you're a surfer from Australia, right?
Everyone surfs in
exactly. So I saw the big wave come in and I said, I'm going to get on this AI wave. And that's exactly what I did. So I really dialed in and my expertise is really working with early stage software startups. So the key, what I look for is really how to, as you describe, right? How to shape the business strategy, the messaging, and get funding, go to market, and tie them to a key, minimally one partner ecosystem. And the ones in my current lineup of 6 AI startups, 2 of them are IBM Watson plays.
Wow.
So we'll talk about it more in terms of what I, met up with in terms of financial services, healthcare, which is really kind of a successful outcome of delivering on what I espouse to do as an AI advisor and a merchant of light.
Well, that's actually a nice segue into my next question for you, and that was, what was your biggest OMG moment from the event so far? And when we were talking before I hit record, you mentioned that you saw the Watson Financial Services team here in Las Vegas demonstrate how they're delivering cognitive services in the key vertical market around financial services and the industry in particular. What can you tell us about what you saw there and your general takeaways from it?
Exactly. So this was a new service, evidently. It was just architected in like a couple of months to get ready for InterConnect, which is very impressive. And
they admitted they weren't coders, right?
And they were not coders.
Yeah.
This was really taking kind of functional architecture, some Python scripting, and putting it together. But the most impressive piece is the fusion between the IBM Bluemix and functional microservices to be able to classify, categorize, package together. It's really showing how to create the holistic architecture of data aggregation, enrichment, standing up, application services with microservices. We saw it there, and it was very, very impressive, and that was one of my key takeaways. Now, furthermore, I leveraged it even a bit further. So I said...
Of course you did.
Yes, of course I did.
I'd be surprised if you didn't.
Exactly. So the thing that was really interesting, I says, in AI, most credible AI players, Watson and others, can address the who, what, where, how. and that's important.
Yeah.
But I said, when I was looking at what they're doing in this IBM Cloud Financial Service, I said, what's really the missing ingredient in Holy Grail is causal reasoning with context and time. And when I played that out, this is not a pitch for the startup, that one of the startups I represent called Milo.com. They said, wow, I get what you're saying here. So we took that conversation to the financial cloud after party and had a very convivial time, and there was going to be a follow-up meeting to discuss this further.
I remember, in fact, there was a funny little segue here. The young guy was in a purple jacket, and we asked him about his purple jacket, and he said that he was running around town on a particular meeting, and he gets in the cab, and the cabbie's like, looks at his purple jacket and says, respect, and then gets to the meeting, everyone's like, whoa, dude, full respect, and it turns out it was the day that Prince passed away.
Exactly, that was
just phenomenal, right? It was a snappy dress-up. He said something that really stuck with me, and I actually wrote it down when I went back to my suite last night. Mm-hmm. He said that they weren't coders, and they developed APIs.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, for me, that was quite a significant takeaway, that non-techie, non-developer people can grok APIs and grasp the concepts of how to plug into microservices, as you said, on Bluemix, and consume the likes of Cognitive and Watson as a service. Do you think that is the trend now? Do you think that we're seeing people come from a non-technical pedigree who can grok technology and put it to good use for their own purposes? Is that what we're seeing out there now as a trend?
I think that is spot on as the trend. It's the trend that, because first and foremost, data scientists don't scale, period.
Right.
So by,
My stomach might argue with you, but anyway.
Okay, but I mean, sure, there's always the need, but in terms of scalability, this was an excellent example of being able to stand up a functional, impressive, very useful applications that's taking the infrastructure services, middleware services, in cloud, others, right? Yeah. So it's really coalescing all of that into something to where, hey, you're lessening the dependencies, on taxonomists, ontologists, data scientists, which is a good thing, and Joe and Jane knowledge worker are going to profit from this as these new services for financial services. I saw second to this, I saw something very impressive in healthcare.
Right.
So the product manager for IBM Healthcare is putting in, patient care, where they're using text analysis, leveraging the alchemy, and actually what they've done, which is very impressive, they're taking specialized coding in medical and embedding that into this version of NLP.
Oh, wow.
So you can take medical records, and they are working, with the big providers there to be able to merge, in other words, in a much faster fashion, be able to ingest that data, come out with what the patient records. These are the key causes, the concepts that you should focus on. So the doctor has faster time to insights to be able to address that. So I saw indications of that. They're also maybe at a similar juncture as far as starting to roll that into the marketplace, which I think is terrific.
You mentioned something that's quite hot at the moment, and I'm going to let you explain it. NLP, explain the acronym, explain the significance of it, because I think folk listening in may have kind of missed that salient point. I think it's a really critical thing to touch on. Just a quick 30-second on NLP and kind of where you see it being a critical component of what's being built here.
Sure. So NLP stands for natural language processing, and there's also a corollary called natural language understanding, which is a little more advanced. So the whole point of it's so as you ingest, as you take text analytics, and that's essentially what's built in. One of the components of Alchemy, has an NLP component. So the whole point of it is, like in the IBM Conversation Manager, the Watson Conversation Manager, they have, we even heard it here at the show, 95% accuracy as far as far as going, speech to text, which is impressive. So there's text to speech, there's speech to text, but the holy grail of all of this, is to understand more of the nuances of behavior and intent.
Yeah.
And this is getting us to what all the big players, IBM and others, are doing, is conversational understanding.
Yeah.
That's the holy grail. We're getting closer to that, but we're seeing really positive breakthroughs along the way.
Ginny Rometty impressed me more than usual at World Watson last year when she got on stage in front of more than 20,000 people and for nearly an hour and a half spoke about one of the biggest companies on the planet and some of the most complex technologies on the planet, but she didn't geek out once.
Right.
And the 5 key things I took away with it were all humanities, medical, science, whatever, manufacturing, music, things that, and I think this is where language processing becomes a big thing. Yesterday, in her CEO and Chairman's keynote, she, as you just outlined, she quoted a couple of stats that I took away as well, and that she said, look, humans make roughly 5% of error on anything they do, particularly language processing text, right? And apparently she said that Watson's at 5.5% accuracy of error rate. So that's like let's say 0.5% away from being supposedly human. Although, I think we often conjure up images of what an AI looks like, and it's often a robotic format, but and that's getting pretty damn close to being so clever that you almost can't determine the difference of what's on the other end. It's like the Turing test
Exactly.
level, right stuff, which
Exactly.
is interesting. I guess it's how we put it to use then is a big question, isn't it?
It really is. So look at the ramifications. This is why it's kind of a continuum. So you're observing. So if you have the vision recognition, where you're understanding facial recognition
Yep.
and emotion detection, and then you have it in a ambient form in the IoT, where you can so you observe, you listen, you have the sensors out there. You're starting to see, industries, like in automation for oil and gas, which is my first career. The whole point of this is really allowing people now to focus more on the critical tasks. Like in the enterprise today, systems of intelligence are replacing systems of record, finally.
Yeah.
That's impressive, because one of my favorite quotes that I always use in presentations is alluding to Peter Drucker, the management guru. Effectiveness should be a human pursuit, and efficiency should be delegated to machines. And as we're getting the adoption of AI across the board, here's three key points, and I'll close on this for this segment. Is machines can attend to vastly more information and more complex processes than humans. Yes, many jobs will be automated, but this will drive human capital to higher order, non-routine cognitive work. But the nexus, and we heard it here at the show, it's really, I don't even use artificial intelligence anymore. My favorite is augmented intelligence, because really it's a matter of where machines and humans work together, and the outcome of that is things like faster time to insights, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think when, if we look at it from a traditional enterprise value proposition, what I constantly get asked for, and I'm sure you do as well, is how do I just reduce the time to value?
Correct.
How do I essentially make money out of this in many cases, but not always. Sometimes it's how do I make my staff happier? How do I make my customers happier? The whole celebrity experience thing is just completely disrupted what MarTech, AdTech, sales, etc.
It is, and the other thing
done,
correlated to that, Dez, is really empowerment.
Yeah.
People work at a higher. We've talked about this during the people feel more empowered, and where they, you're depending on them. I have confidence in you. You can take the ball and run with it, and I'm confident you can come with a positive outcome with more minimal guidance, which is terrific. So rather than just having overbearing managers, we've all been through that before.
Oh gosh, yes.
It says, okay, if you're really not adding value as a manager, what the hell are you doing there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've seen a real shift where managers who are successful have provided the tools to let their staff gain that self-empowerment, that self-direction, particularly when it's the likes of tools from folk like IBM where you've got data-driven decisions. Folk walking around with large format tablets with dashboards and making real-time decisions that are, you know what I mean?
And this is wonderful because remember, for years, CEOs that said, I felt it in my gut. Well, that'll be fine and well, but for heaven's sakes, what, are you obviously you're not a data-driven organization.
No. And too often, even if companies thought they were data driven, they were looking at PowerPoint presentations or spreadsheets that were from last month.
Correct.
And how can I work to the future if I'm only getting historical data that's a month old?
Exactly. I'm glad you brought up that point, because really I've used this before.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the future of business is flow. It's getting faster, it's getting more real time, and the complexity is getting enormous. So really, you're getting higher and higher degree of heterogeneity in your data sets, from webs, from streams, in your enterprise systems. And it's a matter of, if you can apply, machine intelligence to be able to glean and process text analytics, understanding along the way, this relieves the burden of being able to classify, categorize, to get the enrichment.
Yeah.
So it's giving you faster, actionable data, so you can make those decisions faster and smarter. And smarter.
I do like those. I've just written them down, as you saw, but just so the folk are listening, I like the idea of you describing it as new flows. Speed is a given, right? But it's good to call it out. And complexity, I think that kind of those three things wrap up into the kind of the new working model. To move on to another topic now, the three key things that I've sort of taken away from this event that's really been punched forward are enterprise strong, data first, and cognitive at the core. I'm really keen, if you don't mind, if we could kind of do some rapid fire 30-second responses to each of those. Is that okay? Yeah.
Terrific.
So let me run them past you one at a time and just get your 30-second rapid fire response. In 30 seconds, what's your takeaway for folk listening in to the idea of enterprise strong? What does that mean to you based on what you've seen so far in the last couple of days?
So enterprise strong, and I touched upon it earlier, is the systems of intelligence replacing systems of record. So systems of record is only as good as the quality of human input. So you really they're relying on human curated rules that are by definition static. They become obsolete. So the whole point of machine re-engineering is that you're creating new workflows, right? Where it has the potential to augment on thinking, to have better understanding, improve operations, especially the more complex operations. So the whole point of it is you're using this software so companies continue to learn from the data as conditions change.
Awesome, nailed it. Second one, data first.
Data first, and this ties to some of the other thoughts regarding being data-driven strategy. For the reasons we've already cited, right, is that you're lessening dependencies on human curators. You're using machines to do that. One of my, the whole point of a lot of this is, and this is one of my quotes that I prepared for our group here, the social analytics, is machine intelligence is a prediction technology. So as it improves, human prediction skills will decrease. However, the value of critical thinking and human judgment will increase.
Love it. Third one, and for me, this is, I think, going to be a longer tail version, a topic rather, in that it's going to take a while for companies to really grasp the value proposition that it offers, and consumers probably won't actually see it because it'll be under the hood. But in 30 seconds, rapid fire, cognitive to the core, what does that mean to you?
So cognitive to the core is really kind of this continuum I was talking about, is as far as having, integration from data first, the enrichment in the cloud, the APIs driven with microservices, where you're really improving the business processes, where you're really getting where you're getting the transformation of AI to augmented intelligence, frankly.
Right. In fact, I wrote down a couple of points that link to that, where you sort of mentioned the idea of machine to human and human to machine, and I think that really links in nicely to what you just mentioned there. I've actually got a screenshot that I took from the keynote we just attended a while back this morning around the data first method. I'd like to just throw a couple of questions at you. They describe it as being a methodology or a framework that flows from an initial briefing and vision of what you're setting out to do, a discovery workshop, a design and validation process, implementation, and I imagine there's sort of an iterative process there, and then run and maintain. is that what you're kind of seeing? Have you seen that come about as far as that methodology goes in other ways, as far as the agile approach to data? Or do you think that's a significant new innovation? Or
I think it's an enhancement, more of an enhancement, a healthy enhancement, because really, when the whole point of it is that the tools are ever expanding in terms of data aggregation and enrichment. And then we're getting much more sophisticated instantiations of deep learning and correlation processes, right? That is identifying what's happening, and then you can process that, with the methodology we talked about. But I really think that this last part with causal AI is very, very important. Causal AI, which determines why things are happening, has the greatest potential to change how industries operate and businesses compete. I'm very keen on that, and which is why I look for opportunities to interleave, like Amilo.com, into financial services, into media, to be able to, AI with hyper-personalization, you're really getting down to understanding. I mean, this is a marketer's wet dream. To understand, okay, if I know this person, I can not just sell them stuff, but understand what are their key triggers, what motivates them, how I can, and that's really building this customer, enhancement to a whole nother level, which I think is really, wonderful. And the whole point of this is the other theme I'm really keen on, just as a throw-in, is I really think AI is becoming the new UIX, and with this hyper-personalization, the IoT stuff with the sensors and so forth kind of disappears in the background, but it's there to help enhance the user experience.
Yeah, well, the amount of data we're producing now is so far beyond not just human comprehension, but human capacity to absorb and deal with. And we hear stories about autonomous vehicles producing 4 petabytes of data a day.
Right.
Our interaction with these cars is not just our personal experience in traveling in them, whether they're autonomous or not. I mean, the new Audi that we have has a Wi-Fi access point built in so that people can connect. We don't Bluetooth to the car anymore, we Wi-Fi.
Right.
And as we're driving, it updates its maps in real time with a built-in mobile phone that's connected to the backbone of the network. And, I can't even conceive the amount of data that's going through that. I just see a little map of me driving around and it refers to a different blue line on the map. And I think, you hit on a good point there that the cognitive piece, and particularly the AI and machine learning piece, is going to draw out the pieces that we want to see, we want to know about, and it'll learn the context. It'll get domain-specific knowledge about what I want versus what you want, and the time and day that I want it, and when I want it, what I want to see when I get out of bed versus when I get at home, and whether it's breakfast or a meeting or lunch and dinner.
It's spot on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to emphasize that with one brief thought, is that it's becoming a manifestation of the best personal assistant, which can predict your needs by knowing you, a personification of you, a whole lot better. And that's a good thing. It's really helping us. And I don't like to do, right? If you can relieve some of the menial tasks, the scheduling, meeting people, and then understanding you, in terms of your both personal and business needs, that's a good thing.
And it goes back to that point that Jenny made, it sort of covered last year around just focusing on the humanities, I think.
Yes.
And that is, why are we building this technology in the first place? Why are we investing so heavily? Why is IBM completely pivoting its organization around these things? It's because it's all about humans. It's all about people. So the event themes in general, there's been a lot of them, but we spoke earlier on about the ones that are of particular interest to you, and I'm just going to recap them in point form and then throw to you to sort of comment on them. And particularly, you mentioned that you love the concept of empowering people and teams, that you love the delivering on the promise of cognitive computing in particular, and the synergy between the whole Watson cloud story. How do you see these themes playing out in a day-to-day sense in what you currently do?
Right. So playing out in what respect? Let me clarify that.
Sorry, essentially putting them into practice primarily, and then maybe from a consumption point of view. So in other words, let's just talk about the first one: empowering people and teams. What does that actually mean, and how do you go about actually making that a reality?
Right. So certain organizations, some of which of course were here, that are doing like H&R Block, right?
Yeah.
Really, that's empowerment to where
That's a great example.
they're bringing in the customer to where you're creating more of a interactive conversation with the H&R Block tax advisor. I thought that was just wonderful to where it's all about engagement. Engagement is everything, and the better you engage, the more people are typically satisfied. And if you're using machine assist to help that engagement to create a very positive, experience, I see all industries, H&R Block, starting to adopt this because it's customer service is king, and that builds loyalty. So the old way of saying, why I have so much churn, these telecommunications companies? Well, you really don't know your customers.
Yeah.
So the burden is on you
Exactly.
to know your customers and serve them better, and you'll win.
H&R Block was interesting, actually. I was quite impressed with the simple go-to-market message that the gentleman from H&R Block, whose name escapes me now, gave us, and that was he showed a screenshot of 2 monitors.
Yes.
And now, for the rest of us with 2 or 3 monitors doing data science and analytics, we take that for granted.
Yes.
But he sort of explained that the normal practitioner of a tax professional had 1 monitor, and they'd put this new innovation of putting a second screen in place.
Right.
But the salient point was the second screen was for the client.
Exactly, and that's the engagement part.
Yeah, and
So
I was
rather than just sitting there and playing with a smartphone, you can put down your smartphone.
Yeah.
Engage with me. We'll have a meaningful conversation where we're using Watson to guide us, but we also want your input, and you'll feel better for that and more confident that this outcome will be positive.
And I thought it was funny. There's something, like to them, a second monitor was a major innovation. But what was interesting is that he didn't miss the most critical piece from my point of view. Is we've innovated, put a second screen. It's for the consumer, and they're not going to play with the phone anymore. But then he immediately went into the key point for me anyway, and that was that the engagement was for the consumer to talk to Watson effectively, in a sense. Like,
correct.
Watson drew graphs on the screen and started to drill down from the 50 or 60 things that could be bought into this thing from the house and the car and then whatever it might be, fire and risk, to these are the 3 things I think you should really focus on. And now that engagement's not just seeing it on the screen, but actually interacting with that screen and engaging with the system.
That's right, and doing it though in a very natural way.
Yeah.
That's the humanity where we're not, mandating you to learn something. Everybody knows how to communicate, whether it be through, voice or text input. That's we're making it almost seamless to be able to invite them in without encumbering them or worrying them that because I don't want to fill out a survey. I want to have wrapping it in a conversation is really the way to go.
And the interesting thing that he showed us in the demo that had, even though there were screenshots, was the tax professionals didn't have to be retrained in a sense, because they just type the queries in plain English.
Exactly.
What if I did this, or how does this affect me? I was really blown away by that. I mean, I love the innovation of second monitor. I really got the value proposition of making that available to me as a consumer.
And the other point on it, the tax professionals had a bit more enjoyment because this was a lot of these folks are retired folks, and they're saying, I'm having more fun rather than me just being a data clerk, so to speak. I'm now forming, a relationship with our customers, and they're engaging more. So that's a good thing.
I think it's great. I'm just not ready for my tax professional to be a hipster. One of the other themes in particular that I want to just delve into quickly, delivering on the promise of cognitive computing. That's a fairly broad brushstroke. If we bring it down to potentially maybe one in particular, the startups, which I was very fond of seeing the video that you shared with me because it had an Aussie actor as a voiceover. Was it Milo? Can you
Machines.
Can you kind of talk about that and particularly how the delivering on the promise of cognitive and where that was put into use with that startup?
Absolutely. So the company is called, the commercial spin-out is called Soul Machines. They're a spin-out of the Laboratory for Anatomic Technologies in Auckland, New Zealand. You're part of the world, Dez. And Mark Sagar, the founder, is just a brilliant individual. He's Academy Award winner, special effects supervisor for King Kong, Spider-Man, Avatar. He was set up in the lab like 4 years ago, I believe it was, and he wanted to create a lifelike digital avatar that had expressive emotional intelligence, and that's exactly what he delivered on. and in this commercial spin-out. He's still doing wonderful research to push the envelope. But the tie-in with Watson, when Watson got a hold of this, they were selling to the organization that you know well, NDIS, which is their healthcare, right? And this particular effort was for the 500,000 Australians with disability to create a digital avatar for patient care to relieve the 100% burden on human healthcare assistance. And the beauty of this, and this is a great use case, is it's going back to augmented intelligence and a manifestation of not scary AI or just AI for entertainment or games, but useful AI for a purpose, to be a digital avatar to help be a friend, to guide, to be there 24/7 conceivably. And this is being rolled out this year in Australia.
I'm going to get you just to quickly cover the website address, because the video on the demo blew me away. I watched it 3 times in a row. What I saw was the individual in a wheelchair interacting with the AI, and the thing that struck me was that whole human to human interaction again. It was a seamless transition from what I could see in the video of a person sort of coming up to a screen and interacting and asking questions with a human experience in it. Like, I wasn't talking to an IVR on a phone. I didn't have to push *1, and it made the hairs of my arms stand up when I realized that, as you know, your point before around delivering on the promise of cognitive. I mean, your startup has already done that, yeah.
I would say so. I mean, when the whole point of these engaging human-like avatars, Dez, is to create something that has personality and character with embodied cognition. Okay, so the avatar sees you, hears you, and through it's not going to be out of the gate through conversational, getting back to the conversation AI, but through text chat it will be able to communicate with human-like expression. Yeah. So how good is that? Where and this is a subtle and or even more dramatic emotional response. So it's really tying upon the emotional intelligence. And one of the other quotes I provided is, I really think, in terms of delivering on the promise of cognitive computing, we can't forget about emotional intelligence. I think that's a key component of future AI going forward, because you can't, as AI becomes more sophisticated, you can't have human-like intelligence without personality and emotions, because people change their behavior not on information, they change it on emotion.
Look, as a parent, I've seen the transition from focus on IQ and creating smart humans to EQ.
Bingo.
And I started writing a paper that I haven't finished publishing yet around this whole topic of where we were focusing on the ability to do 1 + 1 = 2 versus, is this person happy or sad? And I think that, again, comes back to where the key value to humanity for these types of technologies, or all the technologies in general, the automobile made it easier to get from point A to point B. The airplane makes it even easier. We get big ships that can move things around us to get from the point A to point B. When we think about technology, it needs to essentially focus on and gravitate around humanities.
Totally. And it comes back to, that was probably my biggest, from Ginny's, was that point. Come back to humanity. Yeah. And in many respects, AI, is a huge driver to fostering that, to be able to cut through, special interests, moneyed interests. Yes. This is exciting.
Absolutely.
For us.
And as you said, particularly in my backyard in Australia, the NDIA, the National Disability Insurance Agency, who run the National Disability Insurance Scheme, as you said, they've got a pilot program of 500,000 people who either have a mental disability or a physical disability.
Yes.
And look, even if you've had a fight with a forklift and lost your left arm, typing into a computer is not easy.
Right.
You're henpecking. Exactly. To be able to interact with a familiar face and a familiar voice in a vocab and a language that's common to you, completely removes that whole challenge. We last year at World of Watson, I'm sure you remember this, we got to interact with Pepper. The robot, right?
That's right.
And there were a lot of comments that I thought were unfairly negative around the limitations of Pepper, because people asking things like, do you love me, whatever. But it turns out that the Hilton network are working with IBM and I think it's EY to roll out tens of thousands of these around their hotels, because they don't want you to have a conversation as how do I feel, but it's where's the nearest bathroom? How do I get an extra towel? But again, it comes back to the human component of how does technology help me, right? And I think we're at the exciting cusp of when we might actually see, as you said, not just delivering on the cognitive piece in your interest, but in technology delivering on the promise as a whole to humanity.
Exactly, and then so between the in the financial services that I spoke about, in healthcare, well, this is a healthcare example, but it's bringing in that emotional intelligence with the humanity, which I think is just wonderful.
And let's face it, if you don't have health and you don't have money, you can't look after yourself or anyone else.
Indeed.
So mindful of time, because we're aiming to keep this within half an hour. Couple of last quick ones, and I'm going to ask you for kind of your medium-term view of what's over the horizon. We've heard about the Watson Data Platform. We've heard about Watson Machine Learning, in particular data management and data governance, which is becoming more and more of a challenge. There was a great line yesterday where the reality check is governance and regulatory compliance is only going to increase and get more complex. It's not going to decrease. And I have a question to throw to you in a minute that, and particularly in the integration of Hadoop and Spark and the data science experience. With data governance and built around the team collaboration challenges and the promise of cognitive computing in particular, you gave me the quote of AI and the future of work. Data governance in particular I see as a really big challenge, because when we put everything into a database, we can control it. When we put it into a data lake, we lose a little bit of control, but we gain flexibility. When we go from the data lake to bursting to machine language engines, to cognitive engines like Watson, we're sort of taking subsets of the data or metadata out into another place and then bringing it back. I'd really love to get your insights and views and opinions on what that means to data governance and how we kind of even just grasp the concept of allowing some of our data to go to another place, whether it's to a public cloud offering of machine learning on the likes of IBM's Bluemix and Data Watson platform. What does that look like? I mean, how do we explain to people what that means to apply controls and data governance to data we're allowing to move to places we really haven't experienced before and probably don't have design patterns for?
Right, and there was an interesting slide, I forget from who, that presented at one of the general sessions in terms of the hybrid cloud, how that's like dominating, going forward.
Yeah.
So I really think it's, as if we take that metric of 80% hybrid cloud, I think that's really going to be data governance for that rather than prem and public. You really don't, you're depending on the cloud vendor. Yeah. So it's going to some combinatorial, instantiation of that. And I think blockchain is clearly dialed right in there. Yeah. It's a game changer. Blockchain will be embedded into it. I'm not a blockchain expert. I keep up to date as much as possible. But that's fundamentally, just like you do smart contracts, why can't you do smart data governance is my question.
Well, in fact, it's interesting you mentioned smart contracts. So the concept of a smart contract really is just a control mechanism, right?
Correct.
And it's being logged. And in fact, my view on this, on what you touched on that, is that blockchain is probably a technology like cognitive computing that people won't necessarily interact directly with.
Right.
It'll just be built into the engine.
It's
It'll be
built
in the
into
DNA,
the
right?
engine. Absolutely.
I don't really want to know about TCP/IP or DNS and domain name lookups. It's just there. I type in the URL, it converts to a number. So no, I think you've hit on a really good point there.
And the other corollary to that, Dez, is again, I really think that like Milo is an AI as a service infrastructure. So basically, the whole point of that is an overlay, a cognitive fabric overlay.
Right.
It's not requiring you to. It's assuming that the data lives where it is. We're just overlaying it, and then we can tease out the things like temporal contextual progression to be able to better understand the context of actions and content. Yeah. And to me, it's kind of a new form of data governance on the fly that really kind of dovetails with, oh, wow, that means I don't have to do data mining and analysis. It's like embedded like blockchain into the process, right? I think is really exciting stuff.
And I think it drives us to a point where effectively data is going to have to be self-describing in many ways.
Correct.
We sort of had things like JSON and XML and Parquet files,
right?
Who kind of when you look at the data, it describes itself. and we did that from the schema point of view, so we could sort of have schema-free business intelligence.
Actually, to that
think
point,
comes to the data.
I just talk about the beauty of coming to these conferences. I was wearing a Chimera.ai shirt yesterday
Right.
before we went out to do our contribution to the feeding thing, and stumbled at a wine bar. This guy said, "Chimera, I know that thing, Chimera," and I says, "Yeah, we were at AR World last year," and he says, "Well, let me show you what we're doing." And as far as the data self-describing, he showed me a hypergraph architecture. They are working with IBM,
Right.
and I was very, very impressed. And this is where you can self-describing, where they can take entities and concepts and understand the relationships and semantic bindings between it. Very impressive stuff.
Oh, that's
So
a brave new world in itself, right?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yes, it is.
Self-describing data.
Yes.
So to wrap up quickly, I'd like to throw at you my favorite pun. What's on the horizon for the rest of 2017? I think trying to go beyond that is just, it's a very difficult challenge. But for the rest of this year, with what we've seen so far, off the top of your head, what do you think is on the horizon for the next sort of 6 to 12 months for not just folk here, but outside of this, with what we've seen around the Watson Data Platform, the Bluemix Cloud, Cognitive, Data First?
Right. So I think, we're seeing, deep learning really being the dominant, form. I'm very excited about transfer learning. So transfer learning, which all the big players are doing right now, all the big players are open sourcing, their engines out there. But transfer learning is where you can, train your data and supervise, and then take that and apply it to a different domain. Because remember, we heard here, right? You want to go deep and wide in terms of the domain. So if you have methods like transfer learning, you can actually stand up these or embedded, machine intelligence systems a whole lot faster. One of the things I'm looking for, strong improvement is unsupervised learning.
Right.
So most of the work today is supervised, like I just described there. But unsupervised learning is where machines can infer what they don't know, and that's exciting because really, to really build intelligent systems, but that's where the algorithm kind of learns on its own.
Right.
And there are some negative sides. There's been some posts regarding, well, if you factor in bias into the machine learning algorithms, you're going to get biased algorithms. And there's been studies, like in a beauty contest, that particular algorithm chose mostly white Caucasians as the winners.
Right, yeah.
As
a
an example,
no-brainer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
pretty serious consequences.
Serious consequences. So, but I think that the unsupervised learning for really complex problem sets where the training is kind of like one dimensional, you can kind of go multi-dimensional. So I'm very, very keen on that effort for progression in 2017. One of my favorite things that I say is that when you're getting into and we're not there now, if you can actually crack transitive reasoning, and this is what humans do naturally, is that they can maintain context from one subject to the next. That is really killer, and that's where you really can start to manifest intelligent AI that can interact with you in a very natural, fluid way.
What a fantastic point to leave on transfer reasoning, because I think that when we interact with our current smartphones, we talk to the phone, not with the phone.
Correct.
I think that's great. Transfer reasoning. I think we need to do a blog on that.
Transitive
reasoning. There
transitive
you go.
reasoning.
Sorry, thanks for correcting
me. It was transfer learning and transitive reasoning.
Gotcha. Perfect. We're gonna have to blog those. Steve Ardire, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and I've had a fantastic time hanging out with you and the team here at IBM's InterConnect 2017 in Las Vegas. Thanks for your time, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Thank you, Dez. It's been wonderful, and I agree with your comments. It's been a wonderful event.
We have. Thank you very much, Steve.